Hello, my name is Gary Chandler. I'm the author of the Language and Travel Guide to Indonesia. And this is the first installment of our YouTube language tutorial. If you are planning a trip to Indonesia, whether it be your first, second, or multiple trip, you can never know enough language. Is it critical to know the Indonesian language? For the average traveler, no. An awful lot of Indonesians speak English, especially in the tourist areas, the business centers, the big cities. However, what you will notice is a lot of Indonesians will pronounce words a little bit differently than, say, the Americans, Canadians, or Australians or Brits. They'll pronounce it, use pronunciation that is native to their language. So to some degree it's always helpful to at least understand that pronunciation so that it will improve your ability to communicate even if it's in English. However, there are a couple of words that I recommend to any traveler, whether you're a business traveler, a tourist. Again, just a couple of words can go a very long way. But before I go too much further, let me reassure you an awful lot of the information that I'm going to go through today and in future installments of this tutorial. That information is in the book and it's also on our website at Indonesian, with an N at the end, IndonesianTravelGuide.com. And with that in mind, I'm going to dive in just a couple of quick examples today. We're going to keep it light, but again, just to drive home some of the reasoning in terms of why you really need to understand pronunciation and try to pick up at least a couple of words. And the further you go into this tutorial, the more tips and words we will share with you. But today, for example, what we want to do is show some of the words that are most commonly mispronounced, and again, to just kind of get your attention and get you tuned in to the Indonesian way of pronunciation. So, for example, this word here, B-A-L-I, we've all seen it, we've all heard it, but unfortunately an awful lot of us have heard it spoken the wrong way. Hopefully you know the right pronunciation, but the right way to pronounce this island is Bali. A's are always ah, Bali, and I's are always E, or E, like in Bali, Bali. Another quick example is Indonesia. Nothing real tricky about that, except in local pronunciation, you're going to hear the locals pronounce that as Indonesia. They will make that I sound a little bit more E. That S is going to be a little bit more like a Z in this particular case. In Indonesia, they really enunciate and they don't compress the end like Americans, even myself. I quite often will pronounce it Indonesia. So again, you'll hear the locals Indonesia. They'll pronounce every syllable. Another word that is extremely common in terms of use and awareness, but again very commonly mispronounced, orangutan. This is actually an Indonesian word or Malaysian word in its origination, just like the animal. That's the only place on the planet where it is at. But this is two words, two local words fused together. Orang is person. Utan means forest. What that means is man of the forest or person of the forest, forest person. And if you are very familiar with the orangutan, I'm sure you are, hopefully you're going over to visit them on your trip. They are very human-like in many regards, very intelligent, very strong, very entertaining, but unfortunately very endangered. So now a couple of other examples. You're going to notice on your trip in writing, maybe even in hearing people talk, you're going to hear some words, see some words that sound familiar, especially when you get tuned into the pronunciation. But for example, you recognize that by look, mobo. Well, in Indonesia it's pronounced mobil, and it does mean automobile, as in automobile. So mobile. So point being is there will be some words that you're going to recognize. I kind of call them my instant vocabulary of sorts. Another good example of that is this word here, this botol. Well, if you think real hard about it and you start getting used to looking for words like that, that word is bottle. Now, they're not all quite that easy. In fact, not all that many are, but there are some examples, and quite often they are words that were taken from the English vocabulary. Now, here's another example of words that can be terribly confusing because they sure look familiar. And here's a great example of that, but the meaning is totally different. A-I-R. In English we'd say air. Well, locally it's pronounced ayir. Now there is almost a two-syllable pronunciation, ayir. And believe it or not, that means water. So it can be confusing, interesting, but nonetheless, a couple quick examples there. Now in some of our future sessions, probably even the very next one, we will get into some of our small talk, courtesies, introductions, those types of things. But again, we'll get into more of the pronunciation as well. But just a quick preview, some of the words that we're going to teach you as we go forth. You recognize that word probably. If you think about it, it's not too far off from the word hello. Halo, alo, and quite often the H is silent for Indonesian, so alo is how they would pronounce that. Now, if you wanted to ask somebody how they're doing, this is one way that you could do that. Apa kabar. Remember, A's are always a. Apa kabar. Now, if you were to translate that literally, it means what news? What's the news? What's your news? Well, the way that it's used by Indonesians and the way that you and I will use it, it basically means what's up, what's happening, how are you? It's very common to use that. The response, and I didn't write it down here, but the response that you will hear if you use that, if you ask somebody, apa kabar, they're going to turn around and say to you, baik, baik, B-A-I-K, baik, baik means fine, fine, good, fine. And, you know, before I wrap up here, another quick example. People are going to ask you quite often, they're going to want to speak with you to help learn their English. But quite often people are going to ask you, where you're going. And if you have time, that's great to slow down and talk. You don't expect to always have the opportunity. But if you're in a hurry, or if you're not in the mood to slow down and talk at that particular time, or even if you are, but you just want small talk, one quick response is jalan jalan. It means just walking, going for a walk. And that would be spelled J-A-L-A-N, and then repeat it. Jalan jalan. It means walk walk. I'm walking. Now the last thing we're going to talk about today, and we'll wrap it up. I want to keep it short, but one of the most important phrases that I recommend to anybody to have in their vocabulary is to learn how to say thank you. Indonesians are very hospitable hosts. They are going to take great care of you. They have a lot of pride in their country, their island. They will want to make sure that you have a good time and enjoy it. So quite often you're going to find people going out of their way to help you. Very, very friendly people, and I can't emphasize that enough, especially when you go out into the countryside. The locals are, for the most part, very simple, very happy people, and they're going to be thrilled to see you and to have an opportunity to speak with you. So after you have a chance to share a couple words with somebody, or a meal at a restaurant, or you purchase something, it's always great to say thanks, no matter what country you're in. In Indonesia, you say terima kasih. And again, that is terima kasih. You roll the R's, kind of like in Spanish or Italian a little bit. Terima kasih. And again, that H is kind of silent, but it's there. Terima kasih. I think I'll wrap it up with that for today. But again, my name is Gary Chandler, author of The Language and Travel Guide to Indonesia. And again, You can get more information on the book, on the language, at Indonesian, with an N at the end, IndonesianTravelGuide.com. And look for us on YouTube. We're going to start posting these tutorials every week, and we appreciate your time and your interest and look forward to your feedback. Thank you. Terima kasih.